Okay. Yeah, I had an amazing week getting ready. This teaching this gives me opportunity to investigate all kinds of topics that I'm interested in, and this week was no exception. And also a little more organized structure-wise, and I'm about 2 or 3 days away from putting up the videos that I've collected of the previous classes. So people have been asking me about that. Some people have written, and I want them to know that you'll get a message probably through the channels that I post about the class, about the link. But I can tell you the page you go to, iclock.com/draw, and also you can go to drawingyourownpath.com now. We'll all have links to the classes, the videos, and any notes that I have, and then pictures that I use in the class. This should all be collected there. So if you missed one or you want to go back, you can do that. And I've heard from a few people about topics, and I really appreciate it. And should feel free to let me know what if the level is appropriate, and also aspects that you'd like to see covered. Okay. So again, I ask everybody to mute while I'm talking, just to keep the feedback and noise down. But if you have a question, of course, unmute and ask right away. There's no need to stay muted. Okay, so we gather like this. I'll make a few remarks, and then we're going to do some warm-up exercises where we're considering both, our outlook, and also just getting our hand all limbered up, which seems to be important more and more as I get older and more sensitive to the cold weather, whatever. Warm-ups seem to help. Then will be kind of a small lesson with kind of a guided mindful meditation. And then a larger exercise, maybe about 20 minutes, where I'll make some remarks. Tonight I'm going to do one of the maps and show how it fits to creativity, which I do in the book, but also I'll do a new one. And then maybe some questions at the end if we have time. Okay. Last week we did perspective, and I think it got a little technical, which of course perspective is a little technical. But maybe that was a little, I thought maybe a little less meditative and a little more technical, but it may swing back and forth like that. So especially when we're in realistic drawing, then maybe a little more technical. This week we're going to go back and we're going to look at a different type of rendering, a different type of realistic drawing, which lends itself more to meditative aspects. So yeah, I kind of move back and forth between the two, as I said, the crossroads of the two. I was talking to some people about rendering and perspective and realistic drawing, and it's kind of like can seem very technical, and I think if your drawing is not as realistic as you want it to be, probably you're not being technical enough. That's like, we have this impression that we should be able to draw realistically just off the cuff, and it should be just this kind of like playing the piano by ear, which isn't really true. And even when you see interviews online of people who are just render very beautifully and seem to do it very naturally, they talk up. Whoa, whoop, sorry. There you go. Have to mute. Pat also.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so when they interview people who render very beautifully, they often talk about proportion and form and where the position of the light is. In other words, it gets very technical. And to go all the way back to the beginning, what we're trying to do is just find the exercises, find the practices that work for you. So if realistic rendering, isn't going to be your thing, but it will be beneficial to know some of the aspects of it, some of the rules. So I encourage you to try them out and play with them. But if you feel frustrated, notice that it's frustrating. Maybe question why that is. And also just hang in there, because we'll go through systematic and improvisational methods eventually, and maybe those will fit. And really, once again, the same with meditation. You really only need sort of one practice that you resonate with, and you'll continue that practice, and that can take you, as far as you can go. Once you find a practice that really suits you, and you probably know it already, but you will. Okay, that's enough of the remarks. I got to get everybody drawing, because I really like to see everybody drawing when I'm talking. Okay, so in this one, what we're going to do, I hope everybody can see. Can you see my hand now? Maybe a little laggy, but there's my hand. Okay, so I'm thinking that for most people, when we're writing with a pencil, that this is our grip, like this. Okay, So we can kind of start with the pencil grip. And whenever we are going to make marks, every time we're making marks, we're just noticing kind of what's coming up for us. We're not putting any judgment on it. We're not trying to stop the thoughts from coming up. But when we make marks, we just want to notice that. So, and we're going to work with the cylinder images tonight. So I'm going to draw a few. So there, we're just going to draw 2 parallel lines. But that's a little, I'm going to try to get a little closer. See if there we go. Can you see that a little better? Yeah, so there's some parallel lines. Okay, and then a little oval at the top and sort of a semi-oval at the bottom. That makes a cylinder. And then we just want to make a few lines on each side. And we'll see tonight, this is what's called a value pattern. This is the pattern that we see on a cylinder is something like that. So a little darker on one side, a little dark on the other side, and it gives kind of an illusion, again, fooling the mind to think that this thing that's on a flat piece of paper has some dimension. That's really the trick that we're trying to find ways to master, find ways to do. And perspective, of course, was one of those with the diagonal lines, led our eye back into the space. But the way that we change value, and by another word for value would be brightness. So the way the brightness change, dark to light, changes across the surface, can also lead our eye into the space and trick our mind into thinking that that flat piece of paper with some graphite smeared on it is actually a curvy object. And we all know how easily that can be done when we see an image that's just, you know, beautifully three-dimensionally rendered. It's, oh wow. And that was also the goal of computer science for a long time, was to get this kind of rendering done. This is, as we said last week, the joy of the Western point of view, is to make these illusions. Okay, so everybody's kind of drawn that cylinder. Okay, so now what I want you to do is we want to do different finger grips. So we got that finger grip. We want to switch over. Maybe let me pop out. I'm just getting used to this setup. Okay, so the first one, like that, like a pencil. And the next we just rotate our hand over, and we're kind of holding it like this. So now there we go. So now we're just drawing it again. 2 lines, little oval at the top, semicircle at the bottom. And then we're kind of bringing some lines in on the sides. And if you want to do kind of middle tones, you can spread the lines out a little bit so you cover a little bit of the center. Just a cylinder shape. And the idea here is that we've changed our grip. Now we're not doing pencil grip, we're gripping it kind of overhand. And now we want to move the pencil in between our first and second fingers. So now we're gripping it slightly differently in a way we're really not familiar with. And we want to draw it again. And this one is going to be, you know, where do you feel the muscles in that one as you try to get some control over that pencil? Like, where is it tightening up? Is it tightening up in the shoulder? Is it in your elbow? Is it in the wrist? And also notice if you're trying to get control by gripping the pencil harder. And maybe try and get control by gripping less, looser, and also see how it feels. If it feels better, loosely doing it. So then, if you've done the first and second, then put it between, you know, your middle and your ring finger, and hold it in that way between those 2 fingers. And that one is a really weird one, but fun. So like a strange, like, are you involving your feet? If you're not seated completely flat, are your hips and knees kind of like you're trying to balance yourself in this new position. Just be noticing all that you can. And then, of course, try it between the pinky finger and the ring finger, if you can manipulate that. Hi, Anita. It's an incredible turnout, guys. Thank you so much. This just blows my mind. All week I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking I really want to come up with some good stuff.
You're the best, that's why.
Okay, so now I'm drawing that like with out here between my pinky and my ring finger, just gripping it. So these are all different, and then now just pick away, maybe just like you never even thought of, like hold it, see if I can get that to come up. Yeah, like, you know, like hold it in a strange, just a grip you never involved, and really see how tight you hold it, and try to hold it a little looser than you think you should. Or move if your arm is what's tight, your elbow, try to really just get loose and gestural in that whole new way. We're going to start to look at the differences in the way. See, that cylinder has a lot of feeling to it. It's done a lot looser, but there's this mindset like it has to look a certain way. It has to be a certain proportion. It has to be neat. The lines have to, so we can notice ourselves telling ourselves, not that it doesn't, and not that you shouldn't make it that way. Maybe that's the way you like to make it, but notice if that's what you're telling yourself, and notice if there's any frustration with that. If you're setting some boundaries for yourself that maybe you want to try to get a little more tight and do, or maybe that you don't care so much about, or maybe you want to see what's on the other side of that once in a while. To see, well, I think it should be that way, but I'm feeling frustrated, so let me just draw it another way and see what that brings. This is a way out, a way to make discovery. Okay, so now we're going to do just a quick draw along. Pick one of those grips, but let's take one of your. We'll pick any one of those grips with your hand there, and what we're going to do is we're going to draw kind of a strange oval. There we go, like that. This is kind of a. You can even make it a little thicker on the right-hand side if you want. Okay, and then we're going to make some lines from it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Okay, and then we're going to connect those lines like this. In honor of springtime. I'm going to have a little kind of flower, and then we're going to make somewhere below it, just pick a place and we'll make a cylinder. Make 2 lines the same way we did. There's our cylinder. That's going to make our stem. And then if you want to put in any shading, you can kind of shade around the top there, a few little lines away from the center oval along each of the shapes is sometimes nice. What else can you do? You can put a few lines at the ends, a little wider. We're just indicating kind of shadow there. We're just indicating form. And we're getting kind of a dimensional form here on the stem part. You can just shade. You don't even have to do both sides. You can just shade the right-hand side and give you a little. So here we're getting a little depth in another way, not necessarily thinking about perspective, but just manipulating kind of thickness of line and position of value and the pattern of value. So we will do a whole thing on shading, but this is just looking at just value changes. Okay, good. Now, I want you to do the same thing. We won't take as long, and you can move through them a little faster. I want you to do the same thing as a warm-up now with the other hand, with your non-dominant hand. So you don't have to show one. They don't have to look like anything. If they're scribbly, it's good, but it's just going to warm up. But also, I think, notice what's coming up. First of all, if it feels wrong or right is an interesting thing to notice. like the other one is the right way to draw and this isn't the right way to, do you think that? Is that coming? Like, or this is uncomfortable, or maybe in your muscles you can realize that you use that hand so little and you use the other hand like since childhood, that the muscle development is very different. It's interesting to feel how much micro control you can have or not have with the dominant and non-dominant hand. So do one with sort of the easiest grip in the non-dominant hand, and then in the like in a few of the other grips, and see also if you find one that, hey, this is kind of comfortable. I'm going to try to draw a few with my non-dominant hand. I think people who know me know I do most of my daily drawings now. The structure of them, the first part of the drawing is all done with the non-dominant hand. I've done that for many years. And when I first started it, because I was involved in reading the drawings and trying to figure out all the symbols and signs that were coming up from the unconscious when I was drawing, when I drew with the non-dominant hand, it looked to me with that kind of analysis like it was a completely different person making the drawing. So who made this drawing? I couldn't imagine. So let it open. Let me do one here with the stranger grip. Okay, so if you've done a few non-dominant hand cylinders, then find one of those grips or choose one of those grips, and let's do the flower that way. Let's do the little flower follow along. So again, we make it kind of a ovally. Oh, we make the 5 lines. You can make more lines if you want more petals. That one versus that one. That one's very official. That one's very loose. So we have to think about like two aspects of when we make a decision to make drawing, when we make a decision to do something creative. Sometimes as a purpose, we're gonna represent this scene. We're gonna draw a landscape. We're gonna do a portrait. They're very purposeful. And then there's an approach where it's basically we're doing creative work as a release. We're doing creative work for something more esoteric, more inside. There's not a set goal. There's not a project that we have to accomplish. That's two ways of looking at drawing that can be complementary, but also you need not have both. It's fine just to draw strictly just to let loose, just to relax, just to meditate, as well as have purpose. In one case, you may be trying to communicate something. If you're drawing illustration, if you have a symbol that you want to represent as an image to get an idea across to people, then you're in a communication mode. But you may have a completely other side of that, which I'd call discovery mode. So you may not know. You can know what you're going to do, and you can completely not know what you're going to do. It's going to be completely open. And so some people say, I draw to see what I have to draw. Some writers say, I write to see what I have to say. So you work in a way that you're just choosing a simple technique like non-dominant hand, just to see what will happen. That's a fine way to draw as well. Yeah, so sometimes you have a specific thought and sometimes you just want to improvise and let it go. Okay. So the only other thing I'd say is like, look now, if you've done both of the flowers, look at the two of them and look at the difference between the two. And just try to think about, for one, think about which one satisfies an idea of what satisfies an expectation, for instance, and then ask yourself which one seems more alive, which one has more liveliness to it. And it could be the same, and it could be different, but those are sort of those two poles that I'm talking about. And see which quality comes out in each drawing. And the question, which one is more alive, which one has more liveliness, this is one of the ways that Christopher Alexander, who I'll talk about at some point, and whose universal system of design is quite interesting, and I take a lot of exercises from him. How do we judge? I mean, it's always a big question, but how do we judge the drawing? You know, we say, oh, I like it, I don't like it, but what does that mean? And what is like and dislike, and what is it based on? And so one of the questions that really cuts through that is, to what degree of aliveness would you give that drawing? And he thinks of a work of art as a living thing. So what degree of aliveness do you give each? And so it's fun to compare the left and right or hand drawings. Okay, we're doing good. All right, so I'm going to get a new page. All right, another sort of follow along we're going to really talk about value patterns and what that means, brightness patterns on things. So when we drew the square, the cube, I'll just do real quickly. Oh, there we go. Okay. So when we drew the cube, we said there was a light here up on the upper left of it. I can't quite see that. There we go. Okay. All right. So that meant the top was right in the light. The front was kind of in semi-light, and the far side was dark. And that's really classically how you see a cube shaded. That's a good place to learn. The top is bright, the side sort of parallel to the light is semi-bright, and the part away from the light is dark. Okay, that's the value pattern of the cube. And when we did the cylinder just now, we saw the value pattern was sort of dark on the sides and light in the middle, something like that, to give it some roundness. I'm doing it so quickly, but there you go. That's a value pattern. So now we're going to make a quick way to show you how you can get a range of values, how you can see a range of values and know how to do them really quickly. So we'll draw a rectangle. And a good length to choose for these is just the distance that you can kind of pull, like with your fingers and wrist in one motion, like so you don't have to reach too far. So there's a rectangle. And then we want to divide that rectangle in half, and then divide it in half, into quarters, each half into a half. So we have 4. That's really easy to judge. It doesn't have to be perfect, don't worry. If you're judging yourself, it can be a little off. Okay, and you'll have a chance even to choose again. Okay, so now we're going to start on the left, and we're going to draw vertical lines. We're going to fill all of them with vertical lines. Try to make them, as evenly spaced as you can, although it doesn't have to be perfect. But choose a width, something that, something like that. Try to go fully top to bottom, not like me, doing it in a hurry. Yeah, so we're going to make a bunch of bars. Okay, now in the second one, we're going to leave the first square as it is, and then the second one we're going to go horizontal, and we're going to fill all the remaining 3 with, we're going to cross over the lines that we drew. Okay, so we got 1 with vertical and 3 with vertical and horizontal. Then we're going to move to the third one, and we're going to go left to right diagonal, like that way. And we're going to fill the next 2. Diagonals that way. Maybe you're a Solowit fan, maybe you're just good at math and guessed, but the last one we're going to do the opposite diagonal. So the last square we're going to fill with that diagonal. So the first one has one set of lines, the second two, the next three, the next four. And so you get a very simple gradient, value gradient. If you want to complete it, you can draw to the left of the first one an open square. That gives you the white. And then if you want to go ahead, you can even just fill in any way you want. But as dark as your pencil will go. So there's a simple value range. It gives you a really quick and easy way to think about how to do light and dark. And that's the value pattern for the bar. But you could also see that to be, maybe that's the right-hand side of the cylinder, that it goes from dark to light. And then if you flip it around, it can be the left-hand side of the cylinder. A simple gradient. Okay. Now, I've been looking at two artists online. One is named Alfonso Dunn. I don't know if anybody watches his YouTube. He's done YouTube for, I don't know what, 7 or 8 years. Incredible guy. And he gives great instruction. I've been watching his. And this other guy, Ben Beardshaw, is a kind of a, I think he lives in his attic or something like that. He's one of these guys that's obsessive, really obsessive guy, but he manages to make YouTube videos. And he doesn't use any geometry. He divides all his images up into grids, and he draws each little piece of the grid and only focuses on texture. So Alfonso Dunn is a great master of using crosshatch lines, the kind of what we just did, and to create texture, to create form. And this guy, Ben Beardshaw, completely works with texture. So aside from perspective, texture is a great way to create form and to simulate three-dimensional form. And as long as the texture follows the value pattern of the form, it creates it. So I'll show you how that's done. The texture has to do two things. It has to respond to the light that's coming in, and it has to follow form. So we're going to do, this is going to be our sort of our longer exercise now. And we're going to, hopefully we'll do a bunch of riffs on it. So I'm just going to draw two lines. I'll make these a little longer than the ones I did before, and I'll get them in the camera so you can see them. Actually, why don't I just draw them down where the camera is? That's a good idea. Hey, I will get the hang of this. There we go. Okay. Okay. So on this end, we can close it off, and we can do the same. We can kind of get that cylinder look. So already a little bit of geometry gets us a cylinder. And now we want to divide this one up, and you can decide how many you want, but yeah, 3 or 4 divisions. And actually, after I did a few practice runs of this, I just made pages of them. So I was pretty excited about it. Okay. So we said before that the value pattern of the cylinder, I'll do it really quickly up here, the value pattern of the cylinder, given that we have a light source coming from, let's say it's coming from up here. The value pattern is, yeah, sort of dark. We understand that the light on the lower side, you know, is not hitting it. This light coming over the cylinder is not hitting the bottom parts. So that's okay. But why is it dark at the top? Well, if you think about it, it's like when you look at a road and the road gets further and further in the distance, you know, and it's kind of gets like, gets more flat. It gets dark out that way. What's happening is that as that cylinder rolls over, that flatter and flatter area is not reflecting light toward you. It's reflecting light sort of up. But at the very top of the cylinder, the light's not coming toward your eye. So there's a point in the cylinder. I'm representing it here sort of through the center, but it could be up higher. Depends on where your eye is and where the light is. But there's a point on the cylinder where it's sort of the brightest part of the white. From that, as the cylinder curves away, less and less of that light gets reflected toward you. So that's why it's a little dark at the top. So you don't actually have to know that, but it's kind of fun to see. So that's the value pattern. So when you draw and you improvise on the cylinder, which I'll show you in a second, you want to make sure that you follow that pattern, that it's going to be darker at the top and the bottom. Okay, so value is the first thing. Texture is the next. So we're going to have to pick a texture, and this will be kind of all up to you, and I'll show you some examples. But you know, boxes, circles, lines, hairy lines, I'll show you plenty of them. I'm going to pick a texture. We're going to follow the contour. So we're going to try to follow this. This is the contour line, this line we drew across here, this sort of semicircle. So when you draw a line, I'll start now with, and I'll just do kind of a little hairy line like this, like that. When I draw these little lines, I want to follow the contour around. So I don't want to draw in a way that that I would say cuts across it, that goes against that roundness. So kind of have the curvature of your lines follow the curvature of that one line you already drew, that semi-line. So you want to follow the contour, and then you want to you'll add some structure in there, which I'll do in a second. And the key to this exercise is that the lines in your texture start to break the contour, the top contour, and come out, and that starts to give the real depth. So I'm just going to draw for a second, and you can either follow or just watch or try your own shape. And we're just going to draw these kind of hairy little marks, making them a little denser at the top and the bottom. And leaving it lighter in the center. And when I get into the lighter parts, I'm going to use the point of the pencil and make them a little sharper. If you remember from last week, in the bright areas and the close areas, and that part of the cylinder that's brightest is really closest to us, there's more detail, and the detail is more sharply defined. That's because, you know, we're closer to it, and that helps get the eye involved in that. So I'll use in the center section, I'm going to use little shorter lines, and I'm going to use the point of the pencil, still following the contour. Yeah, so I'm drawing a texture. This is kind of like a furry or hairy little texture on there. And if you want, you can just draw the lines. You can ease up on the pencil in the lighter area. So you see this kind of light area through the center that follows the value pattern. I break the contour. Yeah, I choose a shape for my texture, and I'm going to get this kind of interesting textured cylinder. And then I'll pick another one. Let me pick another one, and so we're just going to practice these and see how they're turning out for us. I'm going to do one. I'm going to make this one like a little. Maybe I'll do something like this. And I'll follow the contours. And I'm going to break the top plane. There we go. So there's another texture. So my daughter said, like, if you want to make like a textured stick or something like that, you could grip. It's funny textures. But one of the fun parts is to pick a shape for the texture that you're going to repeat, and then see how the texture ends up looking. So I'll hold that up a little closer. You can get that. Okay, so I've got some things I'm going to say about that and about this map, but I just want to make sure before we just go into that period of drawing, if anyone had a question about this exercise. Just want to make sure everybody's okay doing it. Okay, awesome. Great, and I'm going to put up under here, I did a bunch of them, so while I'm talking, I'm not going to try to draw because I'll get distracted, I think. But I had a bunch, here we go. There we go. These are some that I spent more than a few minutes on them, but there's one like a tree, there's some other hairy ones, there's a, So you get to practice a lot of stuff with this. You get to practice the value pattern. You get to practice the contouring. And you get to practice the shape a little bit. And you can even notice on the one that I just did, there's this white area that goes through the center. That's indicating the, so yeah, go for those. Doctor them up, have some fun with that. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is a map. In the book, in chapter 6, I talk about in the beginning, I talk about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell's idea about the hero's journey and how it relates to art making, and it's some kind of heroic thing where we go off into the ether, the unknown, making marks like our weapon is our pencil or something like that, and we make this heroic journey where we discover some image that's heretofore unseen, and we bring it back to the world. And that map's hero's journey is used a lot in films and stories, but it also maps really well to creativity. And then I also did one on the 10 ox herding pictures. That's at the end of that book. And so I take a Buddhist staple, the ox herding pictures, and I show how it maps to creativity. And what I found is like these larger maps, these paths to enlightenment that get articulated in Buddhist scriptures, they are like the macrocosm. They're like someone has really spent their life sitting in a cave and thinking this through and developing these paths and mapping these paths, and they represent these sort of a lifetime of meditation. But that whole path can take place in a drawing. That whole path can take place in a day. That whole path can take place in an hour. And creative work is also a microcosm of some of those paths. So the one I was looking at, because what Alfonso Dunn said that you need when you're doing these cylinder drawings, one of his recommendations when you're doing these cylinder drawings, one, he says that you need patience, obviously, to make a good drawing. When you do each little mark in the texture, I was doing them kind of fast there before, but when you make each mark, you need patience. You need some kind of consistency. So when you make the variety of marks, they have some consistency. They're not identical, but there's some consistency in the shapes. And he also says you need some purpose. And in this case, our purpose is to follow the contour and to mimic the value pattern. So we actually do have a little goal. And so that struck me when I heard it. It sounded familiar to me. And then I remembered a teaching that a lot of people have articulated, but one of the great books about it is by Nagarjuna, who is a great Buddhist teacher. And he wrote about what's called the 6 perfections. And it seemed to me that the map of the 6 perfections, which is a map of enlightenment, was kind of really similar to this exercise in some ways, or what it required was also required in this exercise. So that's like a microcosm and a macrocosm going on at the same time. And I'll tell you about those. The first one is giving or generosity. So I said, well, how? Because of course I picked up on patience, which was second or third on the list. But how is giving part of the creative process? So I thought about that, and well, when you're here drawing, you're giving something to yourself for sure. There's this mental space. You're being generous to yourself. And learning is a kind of a gift to yourself. And it's also a gift to others because you can then share what you learn. So you allow yourself to grow. That's also a gift. You're generous to others because you're creating something beautiful. And that may be for the benefit of everyone, to see nice things and to lift up your spirits. And then also giving has a connotation of sharing. And so certainly you can share your work on social media, on a Facebook group, and that's a wonderful thing. And some people have put things up, but part of the practice is sharing it and being generous and letting go giving, maybe in terms of charity or gifts to other people, you are letting go of something of value. That's part of giving. So one thing you let go that you value may be your control, but another thing you let go may be, you know, your vulnerability to criticism or something like this, that you're willing to put it up there and let it go. Certainly when you put work up on the Facebook, you're letting it go. So it's interesting that it can really be part of the practice. I was at the poetry workshop last night that Wendy Insinger, who's here tonight, runs, and it's a wonderful, Milkweed Poetry is a wonderful workshop if you like to do writing. And this smacked me straight in the face because I was afraid to share what I had written, and I kept saying, "No, you have to share what you've written." No, are you? So it comes up a lot. The making work and judging work is part of the vulnerability. So giving is really an indication of that, of being open to share and to allow yourself to do that. Okay, the next is discipline. The second perfection is discipline, and discipline's necessary to get things done. Like if you're going to have a daily practice, you need a little bit of, it's not like you have to whip yourself, but you need to set up a pattern and a path. So in the creative world, if you're going to do work, it takes practice, and we all know, like, we can draw a little bit and we can draw a little bit better, and the more we practice, the better we get. But it should also be something that is there for us to do, that we want to do. So making a space for drawing and a time for drawing and have a practice requires discipline. It's a commitment. You're making a commitment to practice, and here you are. You've all done that. You've all done actually both of the first ones, so you're well on your way to enlightenment. I can tell already, along this 6 perfections. Okay, so then we come to patience, which patience is really about seeing mindfully in each movement, and this is really something I talked about from the beginning, and it's something that I struggle with quite a bit, because I always want the drawings to be done quickly. And that's not really honoring mindfulness when I hurry along, but in fact watching where the pencil goes and how the pencil moves and how I lift the pencil, and applying all of this mindfulness to each step, that will cultivate the patience. We're seeing each movement, but we're not losing that peripheral awareness that here we are, and we're drawing, and we're sitting in our homes, and we're holding pencils with a certain grip and a certain tightness, and a chair feels a certain way. This is all part of just kind of in no hurry to get the piece done. The journey is really what it's about. The pleasure of feeling the pencil moving along the paper, the joy of each mark, how each mark contributes. We can take our time and look. We don't have to just make mark after mark. We can really watch the drawing develop. We can consider each step. Yeah. So when I'm trying to get my kids to sit down and do some meditation, then I tell them, hurry up and meditate. We got to hurry up and meditate. That's sort of the lack of patience. Yeah, there's no hurry. There's no hurry. We can tell ourselves that 100 times, and maybe we won't believe it in this crazy, sped up, slowed down world that we're living in. The whole idea is that we just enjoy each mark. That's the patience. Okay, so that's 3 of the 6 perfections. The 4th one is effort. Once you've done it sounds a little like discipline. I always said, what's the difference between discipline and effort? That always gets in my way. But okay, discipline is like when if you go into a field, like geology is your discipline, or math is your discipline. Okay, that's your field is going to be creativity. That's going to be your discipline. You're going to spend some time and set up some time to have this discipline to do creative work. Now, effort is a little bit about practice. And they say practice makes perfect, but it's correctly stated, perfect practice makes perfect. In other words, if we just sit down and we say, oh, this is my practice, da da da, and I tune out to it, or I do it just because I have to do it, or because I said I'll do it, and I'm not mindful of what I'm doing, and my awareness, my peripheral awareness isn't like really watching while I'm doing the marks, that's not really making an effort. That's just kind of going through the motions. So effort is pledging yourself to practice perfectly, which you know, I can't do every day, even though I pledge it every day. But I want to remind myself a lot that I need to pay that attention to practicing perfectly. And the upside of that is that we take delight in positive action. So if we find the practice that suits us, and that really happened to me this week when I found this cylinder texturing practice. And you can see, I think, from some of the drawings that are there, and I did a circle here too. I textured a circle. I was really having a good time, and I found again for myself this delight in this positive action. That it was something that was new in a way. I found a new practice. It was I was seeing things I hadn't seen before. It was flowing very fluidly. So yeah, we make the effort, and then we reach milestones where all of a sudden it flows, and we're into it, and then there's a positive action. So effort leads us to that flow. So when you have that delight, when you just naturally working hard, you're like, oh my God, I've been at it all day. I have a great delight in it. Yeah, then we're just really beautifully, mindfully absorbed. Okay, the fifth perfection is meditation. And it's funny in this kind of Nagarjuna's you know, seminal text, and in this great tradition of the perfections, that meditation, which kind of when you think of Buddhism, you think like the center of it is meditation. In this practice, why is meditation only one of the six? I think like meditation's the whole practice, but it's not true. You think you could get there only doing meditation. It's not true. Meditation's one of the six on the path to enlightenment. Meditation's important, of course, and meditation is the way that we begin to see everything, but meditation's only one of the six perfections. And meditation, of course, define like awareness of what's going on in ourselves, the deepening of our concentration. So that's getting into this flow, watching our thoughts arise and letting them go. It can be very soothing, but we can't just be just sort of off in the cave. In an art practice, meditation is being able to see and understand the whole picture. So when you're making your marks, but you're also aware of the contour of the cylinder, or you're also aware of where you are on the cylinder. You're in the light part, you're in the dark part. Already you're noticing what's going on in your mind. You're using your peripheral awareness to watch where your attention is. And so you're already beginning to meditate. And this is one of the great places where creative practice and contemplative practice are really align well. When you can see that, that guiding yourself and being focused on doing the action are really like this riding the bike, you know. A peripheral awareness feeds attention, attention feeds peripheral awareness, and it works together. And that creates this kind of flow state. Okay, and the last perfection is wisdom. And that's also, you could think of as insight. And that's when we're seeking to see. So when we got this flow going and we're working along, and then we all of a sudden there's just gestalt moment. There's this moment where it clicks in. Oh, it does look like a cylinder. Oh, it is. This is kind of like all of a sudden there's a kind of wisdom that comes. Like you see that something can come from the parts that's, you know, greater than the sum of them. You can see that something grows out of the practice. You can see maybe something you call progress, and yet it's really about being able to see it. That's more important than your technical ability. It's that you can see. And you can cultivate this inquiring mind. You can understand what you're seeing about the world and about what you want to draw and what you've drawn. When it comes up and you look at it, you can finally see it. And then there's that whole time of reflection and insight, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. When we'll look at drawings and we'll think about where they came from and what they mean and that sort of thing. And so this is the cultivation of wisdom. And of course, you can all experience all of these, and you experience all of these all the time. And just being a little more mindful and seeing that that map of the perfections can help your practice, and can help you understand how to deepen the practice, and can help you understand the boundaries between doing the creative work and where the mindfulness work comes in. So I'm not an expert on the six perfections. Clearly, that there's a book that I have is 800 pages, Nagarjuna's writings on the six perfections. It's incredible writing. There's a tremendous history of scholarly work, and I'm really not even that much. I mean, it's benefited me quite a bit, but to listen to them just objectively as a map, and knowing that this ancient and respected practice is there, and how they line up with what can line up with every little thing we're doing. You could probably find it in dishwashing and sweeping and driving the car and all those kind of things. So your patience in traffic can be part of that. And so the punchline, of course, of all this is that in the microcosm, and finding these patterns in the microcosm helps us see them. You know, we practice them in a small space, in a quiet space, in a space where we're safe, and we can do the work. We practice them, and we can think about them and be mindful of them. And then in the, when we go out into the larger world, that we sort of see that it applies. So if you see the parallels, hopefully, at least maybe you'll get a little more new perspective on what you're drawing, or what drawing practice really is, and what it really means to making drawings. And we're still trying to take apart, we're still trying to deconstruct what we think a drawing is. And so this is like another angle that I'm putting in. I'm going to try to tell you like 100 ways of what a drawing is, or ways to do drawing. There's so many ways to approach it, and it'll be as many ways as we are individuals in the end. That we all, drawing for us is what it is for us eventually. And so we'll eventually start to share that, hopefully, with each other, and see as we build up this kind of vocabulary and kind of history of these ways of talking about it. And if we can, if we can draw, so we can allow it, and then the true nature of what wants to come up will eventually come up. The more we can get those thoughts out of the way of what we think a drawing is, and the more we can get in touch with just this practice of drawing, whether it's through the perfections, or whether it's through perspective, or whether it's through any of the ways we'll go on, improvisation. The more we can get in touch with that, the more we can allow what we have to express to come through. How did we do on our cylinders? Did we have, anybody we had fun? Sharon, you got one? Yeah, put it close to the camera there, Sharon. Just want to see. Oh yeah, look at that. That's cool. That's working. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Lisa, do you want to show one? Yeah, look at that. I like the flowers. I like the textured one at the bottom. Yeah. See, they look really good. This is a satisfying exercise, I think. I don't know. We got a couple of minutes if anyone has a comment on their experience. Oh, Pat, put yours up. Yeah. Whoever wants to. Yeah, look at that. Good for you. Yeah, now look at Pat's. Look at the value pattern of that. Like that white light goes through all, and the contours of all of those marks, they follow the cylinder very well. Yeah, that's beautifully done, Pat. Awesome. Terri, you have something to say?
No, I'm just happy to be here on time.
I was amazed at how my non-dominant hand drew a much more alive flower. Much more. Dramatically more.
I love that you say that.
Yeah.
You had that too, Alan?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's terrific.
I like the non-dominant one much better.
Much.
I draw, I told you, I draw every morning. Most of my daily drawings on iClock start with my left hand as my non-dominant hand. But I found over the years, my musculature has improved, but it hasn't changed that. There will be a point where we'll talk about left and right, or whatever, dominant, non-dominant, and why it does look a little different, but it does. And I do think that it's really interesting that for a lot of people, it's more lively. that is more alive. And also, I think there's a lot, you can get to a lot more unexpected symbolism and all kinds of stuff if you allow. But it does feel for me, I don't know if it did for you guys, but it does feel for me wrong, sort of wrong at first to be like, but maybe that's just because the muscles are a little weak or something. But that's why I say do gestural, be loose with it. Don't tighten your arm with it, and yeah, you'll get some really interesting stuff.
I'm new to the group. Ellen invited me. Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Juliet.
And the left-hand drawing reminded me of a book that my father introduced me when I was young called Drawing on the Right-Hand Side of the Brain.
Yeah.
Which I
Absolutely.
remember that same novel.
Yeah, you weren't here, but in an earlier class we did an exercise from that book where we return a image upside down, and just it sort of forces us to draw shapes. And it does the same, but it does it on in the image side rather than the physical side. But yeah, very similar. That when you give up that idea of that you have about what something is, and you let it come out as it is, just really looking at what's there. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
John, when I was doing the drawing with my non-dominant hand, what I found was looking at it afterwards, it was a sort of a discovery. It was who did, like you were saying, who did this? And then you look at how it differs from what you did with the controlled hand, and you can start comparing it as though it's very fresh. I think that's why it seems like it's more real.
Yes, I do. I think you're exactly, so glad you had that experience. Yeah, I think fresh is a great way to describe it. I think that I see that freshness from the left-hand drawing for me daily. That's one reason I go back to it. And I'm all about discovery and drawing. That's more, I do rendering, and it's fine to render, and it's a great practice. And also, I had this discussion, I think, with Terri this morning. Like she's like, well, I like to do abstract work, but why should I do this rendering? Well, because that you know the rules to break the rules, or you know some tricks, or maybe you understand about value patterns. And so in abstract work, you can create space in abstract. And if you look at Frank Stella's work and also his lectures, he talks quite a bit about what space is in abstract work. It's not all flat, and how to create space and why you do. And so knowing how to create space with diagonal lines or with textures or with shadows, it can add to even abstract work. So there's a reason to do it.
Well, I don't know who did this drawing, but that you've got posted up here, but oh, I love this space that's created and the depth and.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The guy in my left hand did that. I don't know.
Oh, the guy in your left hand did that?
This guy.
I've been drawing with my left hand because my right side is, it just gets too, anyway, I have to draw with my left hand, and I really like what's happening from that as well. The flowers are just so fun. And I'm wondering if a lot of people that I really admire, I'm wondering if they're all doing it with their left hand.
Okay, so if you're willing to be generous and giving, would love to see any of these on any of the social media where we post these cylinders and that kind of thing. If you're brave enough, it would be fun to see some of the work up. And if you're not so brave, if you want to email it to me, I'd like to see them anyway, just to see what's going on. And again, if you have any questions during the week or about the class or suggestions, I'm happy to hear it. We meet on Tuesday nights for the social drawing bee, so there's just a lot of chat. And 11 to 12 a.m. Eastern weekdays, Monday through Friday, there's a group here that Terry's part of and others come into, and that's silent drawing, so we spend an hour, but you don't have to go for the whole hour. You can come for 15 minutes or however long you're comfortable. If you want a little silent drawing time with a little companionship, yeah, Michelle posted an article, it was in The Guardian, about like everyone's discovered that the silent time together online works. Hey, what a surprise. So we number of online.
For the next 2 days at 9 p.m. EST, I'll be doing the
Okay, yeah. So occasionally you can check in on, not on Tuesdays but other nights. Yeah, that there's often someone in this room drawing at 9, and that's I guess that's whatever it is, social and also maybe silent. I don't know. I come sometimes, but sometimes not. All right. I just want to say again, thank you, how much I appreciate it. I was so motivated this week to get stuff because everybody shows up and it's really fun. And hope you got something out of it. And yeah, take care. Good night. Thank you.
Sorry, I was late. I had car.
Good night.
What is the social media site that you post your pictures to?
Oh my God.
There's a group on Facebook called Drawing Your Own Path.
Oh, okay.
That's the main one. There's another social media network called MeWe that there's a group, a Drawing Your Own Path group on there for those that don't like Facebook or want some more privacy. So either one of those is good.
Easy.
Oh, wow.
Good night.
Cool. I think people are going to hang out and draw as well if people want to.
John, I got a question for you. I'm
Okay.
an hour late. So this is a surprise